what I was saying. Come on. There we go. So, yeah, if I don't answer you in like 24 business hours, so give me a little bit more leeway on weekends, but I've either read it and just forgot to answer you, or my Outlook has actually been acting up a little bit. Yesterday, I just got an email from one of my students from last semester about homework, which was obviously sent not yesterday. So if you send me an email and I don't get back to you in like 24 hours, shoot me another email just in case. Technically, my official office is in LeConte 300D. I'm not going to be here a ton, but I can be here if you like need to meet me in person. I'll talk about a bit more about that in a second. In terms of my office hours, my official office hours are Tuesday, Thursday, 10 to 11, Monday, Wednesday, 1:30 to 3:30. If none of those work for you, you can of course just set up an appointment with me as well. So there's always that. Oh, I should probably, just in case, reshare my screen. Another thing about Teams is for some reason, if you come in like way after I've shared my screen, sometimes it doesn't automatically pop up for you. So if you ever pop into class and you don't see my screen shared, which is usually shared pretty close to when I enter the call, just in chat on Teams say, hey, I can't see your screen. Can you reshare? But anyway, so if my office hours don't work for you, you can just email me. We'll set up a time. Most of them are going to be online office hours. If you want to meet me in person, I am fine with doing that. But since I'm not always going to be here, you need to let me know that you want to meet in person. So if you know that you want to come into Tuesday's office hours and you want to be in person, just shoot me an email sometime Monday, maybe before 7 p.m. so I'll see it. Just shoot me an email on Monday saying, hey, I want to come to your office hours on Tuesday. Can I come in person? And I'll just make sure I'm here. For my online office hours, they're going to be on Teams. So if you're on Teams and you click on the little Teams tab, you might have to click it twice. There's like a little button up in the top that says Join Teams, and you'll use this code right here. Because my office hours won't be here because I have multiple classes, so I need one space to meet with all of you. So if you need to go to online office hours, that's where you'll be. You don't need to let me know if you're going to drop by to online office hours. You can just drop in, and I'll just be there. But if you want to meet me in person, just give me a little heads up. Stuff we don't really care about. Materials. So your textbook is Essentials of Discrete Mathematics by Hunter. The main thing you're going to need is access to WebAssign, and I'll go grab that in a second. So WebAssign is where your homework assignments are going to be. WebAssign also has an ebook, so you don't have to have a paper copy of the book if you don't want one. If the ebook online is going to be enough for you. So WebAssign access, how you'll do that, there's this other thing down here. So signing up for WebAssign access. This kind of lays it out for you. So the course key, you're going to need that, and that's back on that page. It says our course, well, I put course code instead of course key, but it's this SC0807, blah, 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 blah. So you'll grab that, you'll head to this link, you'll copy in that class key in here. It'll double check that it's the right class. You'll say yes, and then at that point you'll be brought to the course page. There's going to be a 15-day trial, so say you don't have, I think it's around $70, maybe $70. So if you don't have that right now, you have 15 days of free access before it'll make you purchase. So your screen should end up looking like this, and it should hopefully have a little thing that tells you about your trial and when it's going to expire, or if you just want to do it right away, you can say purchase access now, and it'll bring you to the screen where you can purchase. If you've already gotten a code through some other way for WebAssign, then you can just put it in, or you can just buy it right there. So it's about $71. Hopefully this was from last semester, so hopefully it hasn't gone up. I don't think it would have, but for the homework and the ebook, it's about $70. So that's how you'll do that. So actually I was going to show you WebAssign, but mine looks way different than yours. So what if I click that? Okay, cool. So this is what yours will look like. Mine looks much grosser than yours. So the ebook will be right up here. And then your assignments, once they start showing up, will show up here. And I'll talk about the assignments a bit more in a second.
Professor Casey, I'm sorry, Professor Aaron, I have a question.
Yeah.
Where is the key for the online WebAssign?
Yeah, it's on Blackboard in the WebAssign little thing. It's SC08073785.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And then if we had another class that uses Cengage products, could we purchase Cengage Unlimited for this and that class? I would have to get back to you on that question. This is only the second semester I've been using WebAssign. I want to say yes, because that sounds like what Cengage Unlimited is. I think it's unlimited access to various things. But I don't want to accidentally tell you something that's not true. So I will triple check on that and get back to you on that. So when we purchase the full program and we have the ebook, you don't need the physical textbook unless you just really like to have a physical textbook in front of you. So if the ebook is perfectly fine for you, then you don't need to get the physical textbook. That's correct. Okay, so WebAssign, course code's there if you need it. Let's go back to here. Essentially everything else I will ever post will be on Blackboard. Up there already, I don't know if any of you saw that yet. If you go to course content and modules, that's where I'll post the lecture recordings. So I do record each lecture. I will say that, like at the beginning of this one, I realized, oh man, I wasn't recording. So if you ever don't hear me, because usually I'll be like, oh, I'm going to start the recording now. If you ever don't hear me say that, you might want to give me a little, hey, is the recording started in chat? Because sometimes I can forget. If I do forget, I'm going to try to do some kind of other video. Well, I might just re-record myself going over the notes again so that you guys can have it. But most of the time I should be recording these and posting them there. In terms of the recordings, while I'm talking about it right now, usually I try to have them up by the end of the day. It can depend on how long the video is taking to compile and all that jazz. But usually I'll try to have them up by the end of the day. If you don't see them by the next day and you're like, hey, where's last night's lecture? You can also shoot me an email on that, because sometimes my brain thinks that I uploaded it and I didn't. I can be a bit, I think I've uploaded things and sometimes they don't get up there. So if there's ever anything that you think should be up, that's not up, just shoot me an email. Not to make you think that I'm not going to upload. I'm usually pretty good, but sometimes I'll forget. But lecture notes, come on, there we go. Will be, so you don't see these two right now because they'll pop up later. But our lecture notes will start popping up here. I'm going to try to have them appear before we'll need them, so that if you want to maybe print them out or something, you can print them out beforehand. But I do this kind of guided note style of notes. So we will start a little bit of this today. And if you didn't have time to print them out, you can probably just write things down as we're going, or just write the important bits down and fill some things out later. But that's where all our notes will be. Essentially everything you ever need will be on Blackboard. You won't see all of these because some of them are hidden from you and they're just in my view, but that's the thing. Where'd the syllabus go? Calculator. I mean, you don't need a calculator for this class per se. I would say definitely a decent scientific calculator could definitely be helpful. The one thing is there. I'll talk about that in a second. The one thing, and I don't have this on my tablet yet, so I can't write it down. Desmos.com. Let me type that out in chat. Desmos.com. If you don't have a calculator, since this is a purely online class, I'm perfectly fine with y'all using Desmos. Desmos has a scientific calculator and a graphing calculator. You'll probably just need the scientific. So if you don't have a handheld calculator and you need a calculator every once in a while, Desmos.com is pretty good. If you have another one that you like to use, that's perfectly fine as well. Is there a way we can type into the note PDFs using our computer, or is printing the only option? I don't know if there's a way to like fill it out PDF wise. I can look into that. I should look into that. Oh, let me write that down. I want to look into that. But if you have like a tablet, then if you have a tablet that you can like draw on, you can totally do that if you want. But let me look into hey. Of course, you don't even have to print them out if you just want to try to take notes alongside on your own. But this is how I'll set them up. But I'll try to see if there's a way that I can. I'm not super PDF savvy, but I know there is sometimes a way that you can have them like filled out PDF wise. So I'll check into that. But you don't have to print them out if you don't want to. There's a bunch of other options you could try to do if you have a tablet, if you just want to take notes by hand alongside and just take down the most important bits and then know that you can always go back and fill things out later. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, if you save the PDF, you can then always just open it up in Word. You just have to give it like a minute, not even, to change it over, of course. But then that would probably be pretty good. I don't think there's a lot of, well, maybe when it might make the tables explode, but hopefully not. I don't think there's a lot of super mathy stuff that would get screwed up by Word. So that's actually a really, really good point, is that you could definitely try to download the PDF and then convert it over to a Word document. Okay. So I'll also look into, let me write that down real quick too. Okay. Some stuff we don't really care about. I kind of expect y'all to be here. It's a math class. It's going to build upon itself. If you miss things, you might be sad. Don't cheat on things. If you do, you'll get a 0 on it, and I'll be cranky that I have to do paperwork. Students with disabilities, if you have a disability, need extra time or anything like that, you need to be registered with the disabilities office or else I can't give you your accommodations. So if you have anything that you need accommodations for, please make sure that you're registered with them. I don't think I have information for anyone for this class, so if you think I should have information for you, you should look into that. You can't just come to me and say, hey, I need extra time on my exams. If it's not official through them, then I can't help you. Yeah, Caleb?
Oh, I just want to let you know, I have Cengage Unlimited, and yes, you can get the WebAssign on there. I just registered for it, so yeah, you could be able to get the textbooks and the assignments through WebAssign on there. Just want to let you know.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, so yeah, if you have other classes that use Cengage Unlimited is definitely a thing you could look into because apparently it works for this one. Awesome. What else? This is a class. You should study for it. Imagine that. Late policy. I do accept homework late, but it's going to have a slight grade penalty. And you will also need to request extensions. Unfortunately, unless there's, well, anyway. As far as I know, there's no way for me to just auto do it. But if you ask for an I can't talk. If you ask for an extension, I'll grant it. But essentially, if you do it within 7 days of the due date, you'll only receive a 25% penalty on unearned points. So that essentially means, say you already did half of it and then you just forgot to finish the other half. The first half that you got, the points would be unaffected. It would only be a 25% penalty on the points that you did late. After that, you can still complete it. So say you didn't do the first homework and you want to complete it during the last week of class, you technically can. It'll just be a 50% penalty instead of a 25% penalty. It's your responsibility to let me know if you need an extension. And also if your grade changes, say you got an extension and then you got more points back, just remind me to update the grade because there's lots of you. I have multiple classes. It's hard to keep track of who got an extension on what and what grade is now what. If the grade's already in Blackboard and it's now changed, say I already put the grades into Blackboard and then you did the assignment late, just give me a, hey, I finished that one. Can you update that grade? I wasn't paying enough attention. Caleb, is that a new hand or the same hand that was from before? Okay.
Oh, my bad. I forgot to take it down.
I just wasn't paying enough attention of whether.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. Make a policy. Quizzes, you essentially have until the next quiz to tell me that you need to make it up. So quizzes for this class are going to be on Thursdays. Yeah, sorry. So on Thursdays. So if you miss a quiz on Thursday, you have until that next Wednesday at essentially midnight to tell me that you need to you need to schedule a makeup. Right. Yeah, I figured that. So someone said they tried opening the notes on Word and some of the tables got a little messed up. There's not going to be a ton of tables after the first few. So that's definitely a good thing, is that after these first few sections, there's much less tables. So that should hopefully be at least semi-decent option for the future. But anyway, makeups, you just got to let me know before we take the next quiz. After that, it's kind of like a sorry, not sorry, unless there was some kind of catastrophe. If it was like a catastrophe that you were out of commission for 2 weeks and all of a sudden you're back in action, we can work something out. But if you missed a quiz and you've been coming to classes and you just didn't tell me that you needed a makeup, it's going to be a sorry, not sorry. Someone else said, yeah, to edit PDFs, you need the Acrobat subscription. That's one thing that I was potentially worried about. I can look into, I'll try to see if I can, without having to do a ton of work, because I'm lazy. I'll try to see if I can somehow easily transfer what I have over to Word. I technically write my notes in something called LaTeX, but I'll try to figure out if there's a nice way for me to do that for you, and I'll just try to do that for the remainder of the semester. Caleb?
I just want to let you know, I do IT for Darla Moore, and there's a way you can get around it to edit PDFs online. So if you're uploading these as Word documents, you can save them. And if you already have Word downloaded as a Microsoft student, or with your Microsoft account, you can select the PDF that you downloaded, and when you select open on the when you click right, it will allow you to open it as a Word document. So if you need me to show you how to do that, I can.
I think that's what someone was mentioning already. I think specifically what she mentioned was sometimes, it kind of pops up the box actually on the PDF and you can fill it out. That I think is what she means she needs the subscription for. But yeah, please, anyone, if you just click on the file and you hit open as a Word document, it might not be perfect, but that should be able to. And again, I will try to look into something to make that a bit easier for y'all.
The good news is this is free.
Yeah. All right. Exams technically should really only be made up in kind of emergency type situations, but it's essentially if something comes up, email me, we'll work something out. Classes online. All right. Homework, as I already mentioned, will be through WebAssign. Essentially, so this says that okay, my words are meshing together. I'm trying to say too many things at once. Essentially, what it's going to be is I'm going to upload the homework and it's going to be due the next week on that same day. Now, this says Monday to Monday, just as an example. What I'm going to do for you guys is going to be a Tuesday to Tuesday, because Tuesdays are when we have class. So essentially, you won't have anything this week because it'll just be a, set up, get everything settled kind of deal. But on Tuesday, you'll have your first assignment go up, and then it'll be due that next Tuesday by 11:59 p.m. Okay, so it's a Tuesday to Tuesday kind of deal. Quizzes are going to be on every Thursday. Essentially, if we don't have an exam, you have a quiz. If we don't have an exam that week, I should say, you have a quiz. Including this week. Now, don't panic. Let me finish. There will be a quiz on Thursday, but it's going to be a very introductory, tell me what you prefer to be called, where are you from, here's some basic questions to give me an idea of where we're at mathematically. And as long as you take the quiz, you'll be good. So for this Thursday's quiz, it's a take it and you're good. And every other quiz from then on is technically graded on correctness. But this Thursday, just to get us kind of sorted, it'll also be a way to figure out the layout. All of my quizzes and exams will be on Blackboard. So that's a thing. So Thursdays, last 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes of class will be a quiz every Thursday. I also dropped the 2 lowest quiz grades at the end of the semester. Got 3 exams. 2 of them are also on Thursdays, but then the one's on Tuesday, so just be careful of that. So February 4th, March 9th, April 15th, and your final we'll talk about when we get there. This is how your grade's going to break down. You can go find that later if you want. Support, of course, come to my office hours if you need them. This is where a good place to put this. This class is odd. And what I mean by that is most of the mathematics you've probably taken in your life is not going to seem like the mathematics we're going to be talking about in this class. So what you've probably done up to this point is a lot of algebra, maybe a little bit of calculus, but calculus is kind of algebraically based. What this class is that it's a lot of logic. And most, high schools and even some classes that you take at college level don't get into logic mathematics. So this course is definitely going to probably feel a bit different than a lot of the other math classes you've probably taken before in your life. So please reach out to me when you need the help. The somewhat unfortunate thing about this class is that it's somewhat hard to find other tutoring for it. So the Student Success Center, which is on here, they do have online and one-on-one tutoring, but sometimes they don't have a tutor for this class specifically. And they have a hard time finding one for some reason. So definitely, please do not hesitate to come to my office hours to ask me questions. I want to make sure you guys are getting things down. There's also free tutoring from the math department. Now, technically, this class isn't listed as one of the ones that they cover, but essentially anyone who's there will be able to answer questions from this class. Now, they haven't updated it yet. I'm assuming it's going to be kind of what they did in the fall, where they're also still going to host it on Blackboard, so it would be online. But essentially what happens is you just would drop in whenever you need. And then someone will be there to answer questions. It's more of a bring questions to them kind of tutoring. It's not really like a we'll go over notes kind of deal, but if you're working on your homework and you need help, you can drop in here. It's also first come first serve kind of deal. So if you drop in and there's like a ton of people there, you might have to wait a little bit, but that is an option. And again, the Student Success Center is an option, but sometimes they have a hard time finding tutors for this class. So that's a thing. Drop dates, hopefully you won't need them, but there they are. And then there's a tentative schedule. It will probably get very messed up very fast. The one thing I will say is that the exam dates are set in stone. So even if we don't cover all of this material by exam one is still going to be on Thursday, February 4th. So the exams are set. The things that are mainly possibly going to change is what we cover on what day. But if you want to get an idea of hopefully what we cover on certain days, that's where you can find that. All right, I think I've babbled enough about that. I babbled about WebAssign. So again, here, so you don't have to open this all the time, my office hour stuff, my makeup policy, the exam dates are there. I feel like those are the most looked for information. So that's there. Any other questions so far? All right. An example quiz. Kind of depends on the section we're talking about. But I will say, okay, my quizzes are nothing to super duper panic about. That's one thing. I know it's like, holy crap, weekly quiz. It's going to, so, okay. Ugh. It's going to potentially cover essentially everything between the last quiz and this quiz. I do try to give you an idea of what that quiz will be like. So say on Tuesday at the end of class, I'll probably be like, okay, your quiz on Thursday is probably going to cover this, this, and this. And then at the start of Thursday's classes, I usually like to start with some warm-up problems that will be nudge, nudge, wink, wink, pretty similar to your quiz questions. But it's usually, depending on the topic, 2 to 4 questions. So it can depend on the topic. I could potentially throw in some multiple choice. They're usually more, fill in the blank, full answer type of questions. On Thursday, again, Thursday's quiz is less official. I will include some actual math questions on there again to kind of see where you guys are at. So Thursday should give you a decent idea of kind of the setup of questions, question setups that I do. But it's usually around 2 to 4 questions. I try to give you a decent idea of what's going to be on it. I don't try to like pop quiz you or anything like that. So don't panic. Yeah, quizzes and exams are going to be given through Blackboard. One thing about Blackboard, while I try my very, very hardest to have Blackboard grade it for me, Blackboard is not very good at that. So when you take your quiz, just understand that whatever score it tells you at the end, I also go back and look at them by hand, because sometimes, you know, the answer is 34 and you type in 34 but with a space at the end, and then Blackboard gets angry. So I always will go back and triple check all of the answers put into Blackboard. Sorry, just got someone who is. First day is always fun. Okay, they're not in here. Sorry, I usually won't be this distracted, but on the first day I like to try to get people in here, and he's having a hard time. Let me triple check. Yeah, he's on there. Okay. All right. Okay. Anyway. All right. So let's see. 12:10. When does this class end? I forget. It ends at 12:50. Okay, so we've got about 40 minutes. So we're gonna start on some notes then. Let me pull that in. Oh wait, it's already up. Just gotta do that. So again, I know especially this first day, you probably don't have these out already, but you can probably just write down the important bits of information. I'll try to also go kind of slow if you're trying to write a bunch of stuff down. Oh, also, maybe before we officially start. So at any point in time, if I'm going too fast, if you need me to scroll back up for something, if, you know, whatever, please don't hesitate to stop me. Especially when it's online like this. One of my least favorite things about this setup is that I can't look out and see when people are done writing things down, and if there's any terrified looking faces out of confusion. So if at any point I've gone too fast, I need to scroll back up for something, just let me know. Also, when it comes to the material, I've been doing math for a very long time, even though I look like I'm 12. So it's sometimes odd because it's been a very long time since I've had to learn this material. So I try to do my very best to explain things well by any means. But if I ever say something like, oh, and the next step is obvious, and it's not obvious to you, I don't mean that in like a condescending way. Most of the time it's just I'm too awkward for my own good and words spew out of my mouth before I think about them. So even if I'm like, oh, and this is the easy step, which I usually try to avoid saying because again, I understand that this is not easy for everyone. Even if it sounds like I'm like, oh, this should be obvious. If it's not obvious to you, please, for the love of all that is good and holy, stop me. And I can try to explain it again. I can try to say it slower, you know, whatever floats your boat. All right, so our first chapter really is on really logic. In a couple of the other sections, we'll get into a bit more of some material that might seem a tiny bit more familiar, like probability and such like that. But formal logic, what we're going to do is we're going to look at, essentially we're going to develop ourselves up to proofs. So one thing that you probably might not have seen a lot in your mathematics career at this point is a lot of times in most math classes, you get to just take things for granted. You just know that they're true and you use them to solve things. The only time you really might have encountered proofs before, unless you've taken a proof-based class here at USC, would be in geometry, you know, the side angle side, that kind of deal. We're not going to get into geometry proofs, but that's kind of the spirit of things that we're going to be working towards, is we're essentially trying to prove that things are true. So, now that I've talked that out, mathematics often relies on using symbols in their manipulation, which is kind of obvious. So if I ever use the word formal, that's going to denote a process that relies on manipulating notation. So essentially, given a set of notation, we're going to essentially be changing it around a little bit. Not so much in this first section, but in section 1.2, that's the big piece. So our first formal definition is a statement. So a statement, or sometimes called a proposition, is a declarative statement that is either true or false, but not both, because how can something be both true and false at the same time? So a statement is just literally a sentence that is either true or false. So a couple examples of some statements: 7 is odd, 1 + 1 is 4 would be a more mathematical statement. 13 is even, it's a false statement, but it's still a statement. And your professor is 30 years old. Now with that last one, you probably don't know if that's true or false. You might be able to take a guess, but it doesn't matter whether you actually know the actual truth value of it. So that's what this kind of note down here says. You do not need to know whether a statement is true or false for it to actually be a statement. It's just that it has to be able to be one or the other. Like, I can't be 30 years old and not 30 years old at the same time. So even though you might not be sure whether that's an actual true or false statement, it has to be one or the other. So that would be a statement. So hold on a couple seconds before I scroll down, so people can potentially catch up. That's the other thing. I'll try to pause every once in a while to allow y'all to catch up, because I know sometimes people can't write at the same speed that I do, because you got to see what I actually write. But so at this point we've said, okay, well, those are statements. Well, then what would not be a statement? And there's kind of two big things that make something not a statement. Either it contains an unspecified term or it's self-referential. So what I would mean by it has an unspecified term is something like x is even, or x is odd, or even something like x + 1 = 2. Because, well, no, okay, no, never mind. Because even though if you plug in an x, it would be a statement, the fact that it's not an actual value at this point in time makes it not a statement. There's that unspecified term of that kind of variable in there that makes this not a statement. And it's self-referential. So that would be something like, this statement is false. Because if you think about it, if that statement is true, if the statement is true, then the statement is telling us that it's false. And if the statement is false, well then, but it said it was false, so that would have meant that it was true. And, you know, you see the kind of paradox that goes on there. So you also can't kind of self-reference the statement itself. So those two kind of things would lead to things not being a statement. Most things you could think of are really going to be statements if they don't have a variable in there. So hold on a second.
Professor Aaron, I have a question.
Yeah.
Are you going to upload these notes on Blackboard?
Oh, yeah. So after we go through these, I always post the completed notes on Blackboard.
Okay, thank you.
That's another thing that I should have said that already. I try to do as soon as possible after class so that I don't forget. But it could take a little bit more time. Say I have a meeting right after or something, so they might not go up right away. But you know, if it's the next day and you're not seeing it and you really need it, shoot me an email and say, hey, the notes haven't gotten up yet. And I'll probably be like, oh yeah, I'll get to those. But I do try to do them exactly right after class to just make sure they get up. Anyway, so say we want to look at the following and determine if they're statements or not. So the first is the University of South Carolina's mascot is the Gamecock. Well, just to be general, that could be a true or false statement. It is a true statement in this case. So it's a statement. Again, it's a true statement, but we weren't actually asked about whether it was true or false. I'm just going to put that as a little extra piece. But then if we look at the second one, x plus 2 is negative. Again, if you were to actually have an actual number in there, then it would be a statement. But the fact that it's a variable and we don't know what the actual term is, that's not going to be a statement because it's got an unspecified term. And then it takes 17 minutes for light from the sun to reach Earth. Now, you might know the actual time it takes for light to reach Earth, but maybe you don't. Again, it doesn't matter whether you actually know whether it's true or false. So even if I look at this and I originally look at that, I have no idea. It has to be either true or false. Excuse me. So this would be yes, it's a statement. And apparently this is actually false. But I didn't know that until I looked it up. So even if you don't know whether it's true or false, if it must be one or the other, it's going to be a statement. Questions, concerns on that before we go on to a slightly different idea? All right. Oh, one more thing I'll say about asking questions, because I know sometimes it takes time to actually type out a question. If on Teams, now I forget if this is also in the web browser mode because I'm on the app because I use it so much. But there should be a little hand symbol, and Caleb's been using it already, which is awesome. There's a little hand symbol, and it essentially raises your hand, quote unquote. It pops up a little thing on my screen saying, hey, this person has their hand raised. It's a super nice way to make me stop. So if I'm going and you're trying to type a question, but I've already moved on, and you're like, wait, no, raise your hand. I'll probably stop and be like, oh, what's up, person? And then I'll either wait for the chat to pop up, or you can always unmute yourself and talk if you like. Also, one other thing really quick about Teams. Specifically in the app, again, I really don't think this specific thing is in the web browser, but if you go to the 3 little dots, and then you go down on the app, it'll say turn on live captions. So if you have some hearing problems or just like to have captions, they're not 100% perfect by any means, and sometimes they're really funny. But if you want captions, that's a way to do it if you're on the app. You found a better way to do PDFs? Tell me.
Okay, so this is a little unconventional, but you can open it through Acrobat and do the fill sign, and it's literally the best way to do it because like you can literally click anywhere on the document and just type it in there. I don't know entirely. There's not really a lot of options for format, but it should be really easy to use. So
if that's the thing I was concerned about. Let me try this real quick. Fill sign. Fill in sign. Oh, see, that's what I was kind of thinking of when she mentioned it. And yeah, you can just. Oh, that's super nice. Oh, that's really nice. Ooh, that's gorgeous.
I hope that works.
It's working for me, and I don't have any of the. So yeah, if you open it in Acrobat, and then for me, it kind of opened up on the side in a little sidebar, and there was a fill in sign, and then I had to click fill in sign again, and then you can just click, and it puts a little thing where you can type in. Ooh, that's so nice.
If you ever need help with any of that stuff, just let me know. I'm really good with this kind of thing.
All right, cool.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. That's awesome. All right. So anyway, I don't think there were any. So if you got a Mac, Preview app apparently does it pretty well as well. So Good stuff. Awesome. Anyway, moving on. So, now we're going away from statements for a little bit. Well, not really. Anyway, see, sometimes words spew out of my mouth before I think about what I'm saying. Logical connectives. Are words that connect simple statements to more complex ones. So logical connectives are going to take simple statements and turn them into more complex ones. Now this is where if you're typing it in, you're going to have a somewhat hard time because there's symbols, and I don't think that the symbols are on the... I'll put an alternative symbol because also on Blackboard, use tab to jump between boxes. So on Blackboard, there's, no, sometimes you can't. Anyway, let me just do this real quick. So there's a symbol for and, which is essentially like this. So if you do like, the little caret that's above the 6, that would be a super easy way to do it on a computer. There's an or, which is essentially that upside down. Now, to be quite honest, if you just want to use the letter V, I'll know what you mean. So the letter V would be a way to possibly use that if you're doing it on a keyboard that doesn't have... So sometimes Blackboard will have a function editor where it will have these symbols in it. Other times on Blackboard, it won't. So when it doesn't have it, you'll use these kind of weird things. And if it does have the function editor, then you'll use it. The symbol for not is technically this little doodad. If you want to use a negative sign, I will understand what you mean. So if you use a negative sign, especially when the function editor isn't a thing, I will understand what you mean. Technically, the formal symbol is a little that thing. Implies is going to be essentially an arrow. So of course you can do, a little dash and a little greater than sign on a computer. And then an if and only if is essentially a double arrow. And then I do not know how you would do this on a computer, but we use it the least, so that's good. Is an exclusive or. Maybe if you just want to type in like an O and then an X, I will probably understand what you mean. This one we use the least, so that's a good thing. You probably won't have to just type it out really weirdly. Is an exclusive or. So those are our symbols, and now let's kind of talk about what they mean. Some of them are kind of obvious. An and is just saying something and something else. An or is something or something else, and not is not something. But the implies and the exclusive or and all that we need to talk about a little bit. So hold on like 5 seconds before I scroll down. I need to keep track of 12:50. Okay. So let's kind of look at these in terms of some statements. So let's say we have P is the statement you buy bread from the store, and Q is the statement you buy milk from the store. And I want to write out all of these, kind of logical connective statements in terms of those two. So if I have not Q, now if I'm being super duper formal, technically what I would say is it is not the case that you buy milk from the store. Now, just to be super formal, now I would almost never write that. Of course, I would just write you don't buy milk from the store. So in that case, it's kind of super easy. Well, again, I should try to avoid the word easy. It's hopefully not too hard to see how to write it in kind of more basic English. In some of the things we'll see in a couple other sections, it gets a bit more complicated in trying to figure out exactly how it would phrase nicely in English. So it is good to kind of understand the more like syntactic way to write it out, if you will, that it is not the case that you buy milk from the store kind of deal. And then if we want to do and, well, we have you buy milk from the store and you buy bread from the store is P. You buy bread from the store and you buy milk from the store. So if I wanted to, again, write it out in full generality, I would have to say you buy bread from the store. The store. And you buy milk. That's not how you spell milk. From the store. Of course, you could say you buy milk. Technically bread came first. Okay, fine. Bread, and I don't know why I keep wanting to put milk first. Bread and, oh my god, and then I don't know why I can't spell milk. From the store. You will also quickly learn that I am not an English person. I will probably spell things very badly and write very poor English sentences. But this is a math class, so Now, again, technically both of these would be perfectly acceptable answers. There are some times where I will ask, not necessarily with things like this, but in things we'll see in a couple other sections, where I will specifically ask you to try to write them in quote unquote everyday English. Now, technically, you buy bread from the store and you buy milk from the store is modern everyday English. But again, with the stuff that we'll add on in future sections, it'll just sound super robot-y. And you'll want to try to phrase it in a bit more English way. So in the first one, I did mean milk because it's not Q, and Q is the milk one. So the P statement is the bread and the Q statement is the milk. So I did actually mean milk in that first one. But good to clarify. Now, this exclusive or that comes up, oh, and that's, okay, so I did forget about that when I wrote that up there. Technically up there I wrote this. They're interchangeable. I personally have always known the X version, but the kind of plus sign symbol inside, it's the same thing. Exclusive or. Again, this is the one that's used the least. But anyway, so what exclusive or means is essentially, well, I hear myself. That's weird. Hello. Boink. There we go. Okay, so exclusive or essentially means one or the other, but not both. So if you think about it, like if your mom tells you, hey, here's $20, go to the store and get bread or milk. If you come home with bread, she'll be happy. If you come home with milk, she'll be happy. If you come home with both, she probably won't care. So usually or, and the or that's used much more often, is kind of a one or the other or possibly both. Where this exclusive or means that it has to be one or the other. It can't be both. So if I wanted to phrase this, there's really no better way to phrase this than just kind of the generic way. So you buy, P is bread, so you buy bread. I'm going to skip the from the store piece and just stack that on the end. So you buy bread or milk from the store. I forgot my L again. But not both. So essentially, this is one that's not really used in common English because usually it's not like, here's $20, buy bread or milk, but not both from the store. Like usually that's not a thing that people will say. They'll just say regular old or. But exclusive or is specifically one or the other, but not both. Now implies, oh, hold on a second. Forget people gotta write stuff down. Implies is essentially that something follows from something else. So essentially the Q statement is following from P. And the usual way we'll phrase this is an if, then. So I would say if, and then my P statement is you buy bread from the store. So if you buy bread from the store. And I'll tack on the from the store. Then you buy milk. And there's a little box in my way. Move. You buy milk from the store. So if the first thing, then the second thing. Now, the one thing about implies is that there's also a couple other ways you can phrase this, and it can be a little tricky if you're not careful. Like if you're not being kind of careful when you read it, you might kind of miss it. So an extra example of how we could phrase P implies Q would be the following. You buy milk from the store, and yes, I mean milk. You buy milk from the store. If you buy bread from the store. Now this technically might seem backwards because the Q came first and then the P, but it's essentially the difference in phrasing and the placement of the if. Notice that the P statement still came behind the if. So essentially, it depends on where the if is. If the if is in the front, then it's going to be P implies P, then Q. If it's P implies Q. If it's Q implies P, then it's different. But if it's P implies Q, then if it's if in the front, it would be if P, then Q. But if you move the if to the middle, then it's Q if P. So it's kind of like the if follows the first thing. Sorry, that I know what I meant, but that's not what I said. The first thing follows the if is what I should have said. And it just, you can put the if in the middle or in the front. Most of the time I will just default to if then, but especially on your homework, you might see the statements written as the if in the middle, so just be careful on that. All right, let's get through, we should be able to get through that, then we'll call it a day. So if we consider these statements, so the statements we were looking at first were kind of, just a single thing, and now we're kind of combining statements together. So considering a statement, it still only has two options. It's either true, can I write the word true? Or it's false. There's still only those two options for these statements. So essentially what happens, can I scroll down a little bit? I'll keep that in there. So we can consider whether a statement formed with these connectives is either true or false, and it kind of essentially defines them. So we're going to kind of define the true or false values for these connectives. And this is going to be our first introduction to something called truth tables. So we're going to look at these truth tables for these connectives, and then we'll see where we're at. We might do one other example, but other than that, that'll probably be where we wrap up. So essentially, truth tables are going to kind of look like this. They're going to look probably a decent bit larger because this is just like it's a baby truth table, if I'm being honest. But essentially what happens is that we're going to consider the statements to either be true or false and then continue on with the connectives. So essentially in this first one we're going to look at not first. So if you think about it, given an original statement P, that original statement could either be true or false. Now, those of you trying to do this on a thing, I'll try to slow down, and if I'm going too fast, just let me know. So if the original statement is true, if you then consider not P, it would be false, because if the first thing is true and then you essentially negate it, if you will, that would mean it's false. So if I buy bread from the store is true, then I don't buy bread from the store would be false if we're in the same situation. If I come home from the store with bread and I say, I bought bread from the store, then I would be telling the truth. And if I came home from the store with bread and I said, I did not buy bread from the store, then obviously I'm a liar. So it's essentially just the opposite of the original statement. So essentially if the original statement's false, then not P would be true. I'm going to come back to this idea later, so I'm going to use T or Fs today, but in case maybe you like this better, you can also use ones and zeros if you prefer. So that's a thing, 1 for true, 0 for false. Today I'm going to use T's and F's, but sometimes I'll try to bounce back and forth just so that we get practice with both. But if we move on to and then, so here it gets a bit, notice that I have more rows here. So essentially, we have to consider all combinations. So we could have the case where the first statement is true and the second statement is true. The first statement is true and the second statement is false. The first statement is false, the second statement is true. or the first statement is false and the second statement is false. And then for the rest of them, I filled that part out for us so that we don't have to write it down all the time. But that's essentially why it gets filled out that way, is we have to consider essentially every pair. Also, we will eventually be getting to truth tables that have 3 variables instead of 2. So we'll have 8 rows instead of 4. So every time you add on another variable, it doubles the amount of rows. So we're only going to really go up to 3 variables. But anyway, now this one, you need to realize that what we're talking about here is we're talking about whether the entire statement is true. So if my statements are still the bread and milk, so P is I buy bread, Q is I buy milk. If you say I buy milk and bread from the store, that statement with the and in it is only going to be true if both of the individual things are true. So the only time this is going to be true is actually in this first case. Because if you think about it, in the second case, you bought bread, but you didn't buy milk. So if you told your mom, hey, I bought bread and milk from the store, you'd be lying because you didn't get the milk. So that would be false. So it'd be essentially the opposite situation. And then the one that trips up people sometimes is that, yes, I understand that both of those are false. So you might think, oh, well, they agree. But it's not just about whether or not they both agree with each other. It's the fact that if you tell your mom, I bought bread and milk from the store, but you bought neither of them, then you're a big old liar. And you don't have any bread and milk. So it's not just about do they agree, it's that they both must be true. So let me just, both must be true, because we're still looking for the actual true or false nature of the actual statement. Okay. Wait a couple seconds. Do a weird dance. Y'all gonna have to get used to it. I'm real weird. All right, if we move on to or, this one gets a bit, you know, because if you say I buy milk or bread from the store, then really you only have to buy one or the other, or you could buy both. This is the one where it's perfectly fine to have both. So if they're both true, then the or statement would also be true. But the thing about or is that since it's or, you could also just do one or the other. So true, false still gets us a true statement for or, because if you say to whoever, I bought milk or bread from the store, and you bought milk but don't have bread, that statement with the or is still true. Same for vice versa. The only time that's going to be false is if you don't have either of them. So one or the other. You don't really have to write down these extra notes on the side, but just to kind of remind us of how these are working. This is essentially one or the other, or both are true. Questions so far? Hold on a couple seconds before I scroll down. To just have to scroll back up. All right. So exclusive or is the one where it's one or the other, but not both. So in this case, if the both are true, then the exclusive or is actually false, because it's not exclusively one or the other, you did both, which is bad in that situation. But if we have a situation where only one of them is true, then that's going to make the exclusive or true. It doesn't matter which one, as long as only one of them is true. And the same thing kind of with the and, it doesn't matter, like we're looking at actual truth statements here. So if you're saying one or the other, but you didn't do either, then that's also false. So only one or the other. Well, let me say only one can be true. And maybe I should clarify, if you add on extra, well, no, you take, never mind. That wouldn't matter because you break the truth table up in bigger spaces. Never mind. Now we get to the weirder ones, and this is probably actually where we're going to end because I'll probably have to babble about this a little bit. Implies gets a little weird. So true implies true. So if the statement was, you know, go back to the buy bread, buy milk thing. If you buy bread from the store, then you buy milk. So if I bought bread and I bought milk, then that statement, if I buy bread, then I buy milk, would be true. I'm also going to do another situation in a second, but let me keep going with the bread or milk. Now, true implies false. If you buy bread from the store, then you buy milk from the store. Say you bought bread, but you didn't buy milk. So the implication, the p-value is true, but then you didn't end up buying milk. So the statement, if you buy bread, then you buy milk, is not true because you bought bread, but you didn't buy milk. So this is going to be false. And now here's where it gets a little tricky. When the implication is false, these are both just, it's kind of vacuously true in a way. So if I say if I buy bread from the store, then I buy milk from the store, but I don't actually buy bread, it doesn't even really matter whether I bought milk or not. It's almost like you don't know whether or not that would be true, so you just assume it's true. So the easier way, I think, besides the bread and milk, is to almost consider it as a promise. So say instead we looked at, if it's raining, I will drive you home. But say it's not raining. It doesn't matter whether or not I drove you home. We can't really say that I'm a liar. So even if it's not, even if I didn't drive you home, it wasn't raining. So I probably still didn't lie. Because if it was raining, I might have driven you home. So when the original statement is false, when the implication in the front is false, no matter what the conclusion is, whether the conclusion is true or false, you consider the entire statement to be true. It's almost like, if I'm purple, then I'm a whale. Well, I'm not purple, so who knows if I was purple, maybe I'd be a whale. Kind of deal. So that one's a bit harder to wrap your head around. And that's probably the best I can give you, is just think of it as a promise. Even if the first thing's not true, that doesn't necessarily mean that you were lying to them when you told them, hey, if it's raining, I'll drive you home. Now, if and only if is essentially implies in both directions. So this is essentially implies in both directions. So let me come off to the side here and kind of do a little bit of an expanded table. Sorry if you're trying to do this on a computer. You don't have to write this down either. But anyway, to try to explain why this is what it is, say I consider both implications separately. So the P implies Q we pretty much just looked at. It's true, false, true, true. But now let me say I'm going to go Q implies P. So I'm going to go backwards. So I'm going to have a true implies true for the first one. So that's going to give me a true. Then I'm going to have a false implies true. Well, if it starts with a false, it always ends up being true. And then I'm going to have a true implies false. That's the only case where the implication is false. So we have false there. And then a false implies false. Well, if it starts with a false, it doesn't matter. So that would be true. And then what the if and only if says is that essentially it's an and connective between these two. So essentially, are both of these true? So the only cases where both of those are true is in the first row and the last row. That's the only case where both of them ended up being true. So our if and only if is going to have a truth table of true, false, false, true. Because again, it was only in those first two rows that both of the implications ended up being true. Let me change that back to the color that I've been doing for the rest of these. True, false, false, true. Questions, concerns about that? Okay, so we're done taking official notes for today, but I do want to say something really quick before we leave. So essentially what we're going to head up to next is we're going to do truth tables in a bit more, let me try to leave that one in there a little bit, in a bit more fullness. Oh, I'm sorry, someone has their hand up.
Do you always suggest doing the separate table on the side when you're doing the if and only if? Like doing do you really need to?
You don't need to by any means, no. Once you've done it enough in your life, you can probably just know that that's how it goes. Sometimes I have to remind myself if it's been a while, so I'll sometimes do that off to the side, but it's not necessary by any means. If you just can recognize that if and only if is a true, false, false, true situation.
Okay.
Cool.
So what we're going to do next is we're essentially going to build up to more complicated statements than just, so essentially if you look down here, the statement that we will be working up to is a P or Q implies not P. So we essentially break up that into pieces and then kind of do one step in each piece. So you are kind of going to have to memorize how these go. Now, we are going to be doing this so often that it should just be ingrained in your head anyway. And the main ones you need to care about are the not, and, or, and really the implies, because if you have the implies down, you can always do the split it up and do the if and only if. But the exclusive or you don't have to worry about too much. But essentially, it's just that you want to be able to remind yourself, okay, if I have an and, they both have to be true. If I have an or, it's just one or the other, or both. You kind of need to be able to talk yourself through it. So I would say the only one that really takes some time to memorize, quote unquote, is the implies one, because the other ones have a bit more of a, obvious is not the word I want. But, you know, it's kind of like we use and or so much already that we kind of understand what they mean. The implies is kind of the newbie. But you kind of need to know these generic tables to be able to fill out something like this, because you need to do each step separately. But that's essentially what we're going to work up to on Wednesday. Not Wednesday, Thursday. So we'll hopefully finish these notes on Thursday. Might be a little tight, but we'll see what we'll do. So on Thursday, we'll continue on these notes. We will have that technically official, but less official quiz at the end of class. So remember, that's just going to be some generic get to know you questions and potentially some, I might ask you some pre-calculus questions, because there's a couple things where later on you're going to want to know how to do some things pre-calculus wise. And so while I won't mark them for correctness, if you struggle with any of the questions on that quiz, you should reach out and I can try to hopefully give you some material, because we don't have time to go over those pre-calculus material, but you will want to be familiar with it. It's mostly like exponential functions and, well, no, not exponential functions, exponent rules and stuff like that. So technically the recording stays in Teams for a couple of days, but I do post them on Blackboard. So they'll be on Blackboard. Technically you can find them on Teams, but I think they do disappear after 20 days for some reason. But they will all be on Blackboard eventually. I'm going to probably do that right now. We're technically a minute over, so if you need to go somewhere, go ahead. Otherwise, we're technically done anyway. I don't know, what is this spotlight? I've never seen that before in my life. Anyway, if you have any questions, feel free to stick around for a couple of seconds. I'll be around. Otherwise, see y'all on Thursday. And have a good day. Hooray. Bye.